Greetings, YouTube. The other day at work, I found myself thinking about the Spelljammer setting. A setting I haven't really talked about a great deal here. I thought of it because I was just contemplating some of the different races in the system in Pathfinder and 3.5. It occurred to me that the Warforged would be just about the perfect Spelljammer crew. They don't eat, they don't drink, they don't sleep, and they don't breathe. So you never have to be concerned with whether the air pocket on your spelljamming vessel is fresh. Who cares? I could very well see Warforged becoming, or another construct-like race. You officially can't have Warforged in a Pathfinder product, but they have the half construct template now, or racial feature. They would be just perfect as intergalactic merchants, or interstellar merchants, or interplanar merchants. Depends how you want to run the whole Spelljammer vibe. And they could also be wonderful raiders. Now, I've never run an actual Spelljammer game. I have used Spelljammer vessels, however. There was actually a plot line in a campaign I was running at one point where one of the end goals was to find a Spelljamming vessel which had sunk to the bottom of a shallow sea. And it actually was a modified Hammerhead model, which is my favorite of all of the different ships out there. I also have a great fondness for a lot of the things that the elves had created. A lot of biotech things. I really have a thing for biotechnology. I'm sorry, I'm petting a cat. There's a cat in here on the floor. And I really would love to have had that storyline pan out, but it didn't. The campaign ended before that happened. Such is life. It's amazing how many storylines I've had in campaigns in the past that never got used because I knew they were there, players didn't, and they just never got used. I can always recycle them, of course. Another campaign I ran also in the Forgotten Realms. The first one was in the Forgotten Realms. This is also in the Forgotten Realms. In it, Myth Draenor had still existed. The great elven city didn't fall. The great battle that traditionally wipes it out in the Forgotten Realms setting occurred, and when it occurred, the elves asked for allies. They petitioned all the humans around them to come to their aid, and most of the humans ignored them. The worst, however, was Sembia, who essentially did everything they could in their power to undermine the elven ability to defeat the enemy, in the hopes of then being able to snatch up some of the elven resources and or territories. The one country, however, that really shone through for the elves was Cormyr. Cormyr poured its heart out in its people, both in actual military units and in militia and individual adventurers who poured into the Myth Draenor and helped the elves. And the elves won. And the elves never forgot that Cormyr was their ally. So jump forward to the campaign, and Sembia had a low-boiling war with Cormyr, a little bit of border skirmishes back and forth, nothing major. In fact, the player characters had to work their way through that at one point because they had to get somewhere. And then eventually Sembia puts up a blockade, preventing all Cormyrian ships from getting in and out of Cormyr's water. And that is a major crimp on Cormyr's ability to survive as a viable nation. Having your shipping cut off is deadly to your nation's economy. So the Cormyrians petition the elves, can you help us? At the moment, we don't have the military ability to defeat them in an all-out war. They've got more forces than we do. And the elves are like, well, we have very long memories, and we remember what Sembia did to us, so yes, we can help you. Unknown to anybody except the elves, but the elves had spelljamming ships. They were all of the biotech variety, and after agreeing to this, one night they launched their ships. And at sundown, the Sembian nation had a navy, and at dawn, it didn't. They simply wiped out every single Sembian vessel there was. Survivors of the attack described giant birds and insects coming out of the sky, blasting them with fire and lightning and spells. They thought they were some kind of variety of dragon or demon or something. But shortly after that, the campaign kind of wound down, so I never got to really play out the whole political outcome of that, but there would have been one. But that also got me thinking of how you can use spelljamming vessels against peoples that don't also have spelljamming vessels. Imagine a ship full of Warforged. They're mercenaries. They could contact someone and they say, we can take care of that siege you got going over there. We don't tell you how it happens. We just break the siege for you, okay? And at night, they bring a spelljamming ship in, drop some troops, take out the gate, put them back up, the ship takes off. Now, in a world of Magic, that's less of a thrilling thing than it is in our world, but it's a game changer because a spelljamming ship can take an entire group of people and fly them. Whereas most Magic in traditional D&D and Pathfinder, it's individuals flying or there are individuals on a steed. So now you've got a game changer where you have an entire group of people that can come into one vessel, and of course you'd be used for bombardment and used for trade. Now that got me thinking even further, a little deeper. Say we have a campaign, this is just an idea I was throwing out in my head the other night, where spelljamming is new. So spelljamming is the equivalent of 1915 in our world. Alright, so then we move forward a little bit, and spelljamming gets into the 1920s or 30s. So now you've got a new era. We're just opening up the idea, that spelljamming is a thing. And any nation that doesn't have spelljamming technology is at an incredible disadvantage to any nation that does, just as any nation that didn't have the ability to put up airplanes in an air force was at a significant disadvantage to a nation that could. And because spelljamming vessels are essentially spaceships, you have the entire Buck Rogers vibe. So not only can you do the Indiana Jones going into areas that you could never access before, because now you have a ship that can carry an entire party at once, but you've got the ability to go to other planets in the system, assuming that your campaign is set up in a system that looks vaguely real, so that you get a sun and planets, things like that, which would be perfect for this kind of thing. Or, planetary fragments, a world that was shattered, and you can now go to all the different fragments, things like that. Which was there's a campaign somewhere out there I've seen that did that. Could have been Savage Worlds, I'm not positive, but the idea is still valid. That you could have a world that different worlds that because you have this mode of transportation, they can go to them. And of course, a spelljamming ship can then leave your system and go far away to another system. And depending how you want to run the spelljamming, it's up to you. You can do it strictly as is in the book, or you can make a slight variation. There could be, if it's a complete fantasy world, you can have air between the planets, though I prefer the airless space as in our world and is predicted in spelljamming. I prefer that. It gives it a little more drama, I think. And you can do things, for example, Warforged make bad arcane casters, but they make decent divine casters, so you could have spelljamming ships run by divine spells, or you could also have spelljamming ships fueled by psionic abilities, because there's nothing preventing a Warforged from being a psionic expert. And even if there isn't a spelljamming helm that does psionics, it would be really easy to create. X number of points spent gets you X amount of speed, and you can't spend more points than you have manifestor levels. Done. I just wrote it. You know what I mean? Just look up what the current rates are for casting spells and just copy them. But I did wonder, could you run a spelljamming helm off of a warlock? Now, a warlock has an at-will ability that has a cap. So as you gain in power, it does more and more damage. And maximum level, I think, is 9d6, if my memory serves me correct. But since you can do it every round, you can't just have someone just dump one thing and then walk away. Now, I think you'd have to have them plug themselves into a spelljamming helm and really fuel it. So, like, you're literally sitting there and you're pouring your power into the helm every single round. It doesn't harm you, but it also means you're completely tied up. You can't walk away. You can't do anything else. And if you use your abilities while you're on the helm, the ship suddenly doesn't get that power for that period. And maybe it coasts. Maybe it slows down. I can't remember what happens. I don't have all the details of the spelljamming mechanism in my head. I apologize. But I think the idea of fantasy spacecraft is awesome. And some of the illustrations and the floor plans of those ships were great. I am an absolute junkie for floor plans. I love floor plans, and especially of vehicles and stuff. And there's so many things in the Spelljammer game that is awesome. I really need to do a video about the different ships there and there. I think I still have all of them in a box over there in the corner. In a box set, I think I still have all of the different maps and illustrations of the ships. But it's just, a wonderful idea to play with. Warforged space pirates. The World War One pulp era exploration and Buck Roger exploration of a star system or a solar system. The use of Spelljammers against each other in a more advanced campaign, or how do they work against a world where they're the new thing? And how do they work when they're established things? And now you have fully functioning air forces. And you can travel from world to world. So I've always loved that vibe. And of course, it was the science fiction in D&D is not completely unknown. Dragonstar is also an incredibly useful setting for that. Though I think that the Spelljamming setting had a different vibe to it than Dragonstar did. Dragonstar had more Star Wars to it, whereas Spelljamming had more pulp, in my opinion. It had GIF, humanoid griffin, hippopotamus. So you can't really take hippopotami all that seriously when they're walking around in uniforms and wielding pistols. But I loved the whole idea of Spelljamming. The illustrations were marvelous. The biotech of the elves was awesome. It was just a great setting. Even though I never got to use it in its complete nature, I did get to use small parts of it, and I think that it is still rife for the picking for any GM out there who get their hands on it, or any player that would like to be inspired to maybe be the group that invents a Spelljamming vessel. That would not be cool. Maybe your group's the one that invents it and brings it into the world. That's going to open up a whole kettle of worms, though, isn't it? So tell me, what has your experience been with Spelljamming vessels and the whole setting? Do you think it has an application in current D&D and Pathfinder games? I'm interested in knowing.